So first of all, very nice to meet you, Noel. My name is Phanos. I'm one of the co-founders behind 2050 Materials. It's a platform where we help the design industry find and compare sustainable materials, and I'm super excited to have a chat today. Let's start maybe with a short introduction of your role and your background and sort of how the company deals with sustainability as these times are changing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, thank you very much, and pleasure to be talking to you. My name is Noel Wibrand, and I'm a partner and trained architect here working at Dorte Mandrup. My role at the office is head of, I think we call it sustainable innovation at the moment, and even some strings to digitalization. And I see those two fields from my personal perspective, sustainability, digitalization, as kind of each other's friends, so they're pretty much in line, or two sides of the same course, if you may. But they fit into our general approach on sustainability in the way that we try to build up each time we address any project, not even just the spectacular ones that we have done, but in our general approach, it's a kind of we call it an artistic approach, but it builds on evidence and it builds on knowledge of the place that we're actually building. So this is kind of the offspring of everything that we do this thorough analysis using digital tools, but also to make the best fit in the current environment that we are addressing with our projects. So this is kind of where the artistic bit also comes in our approach, that we try to kind of translate our, say, scientific findings into an artistic translation and making that into a product that then can be evaluated and reevaluated, even to end up in a final project. So we try to use this methodology in all projects that we address. And in that sense, you will be thinking that the social sustainable agenda fits right in, and obviously it does, maybe mainly in urban settings and where you have this kind of environment, but we also find that quite helpful in addressing more substantial climate crisis questions. This thorough investigations can kind of also give us detailed information on the site regarding wind, local materials, how to do the foundations, and other kind of more into the bone, or say practical issues that addresses this climate crisis, and also at the time at expanding this knowledge a bit. So we're talking about social, we're talking about the climate, but also on biodiversity and nature, land use, which has, of course, a lot of things very hands-on to do with the sites that we explore and where we build. And this goes actually, you could say, for some of our more spectacular projects. Ice Fjord Center, northern part of Greenland, a very spectacular natural setting, but you could kind of easily use the same mindset in an urban, very dense context. So in that way, stop me if I'm going too far. But anyway, we find that the sustainable approach is not really something new, but something that fits in easily into our approach that we have been developing over years, or actually decades. So this is just one more new focus that we will add through everything, and in that way, it's not really. Sometimes we say, and I agree that the discussion is kind of new or new-ish, but it's a method that we have been using for a much longer time, and we could even say that we are getting, even some of our older projects are being pulled forward and addressed for their sustainable look, even though that we didn't really talk about sustainability when we did them. So that's just an example of kind of how we see this synergy in the method and in the buildings that we do produce at the final end. Yeah.
That's super interesting. I hear that you talk a lot about sort of it's very nice that you didn't use the buzzword holistic, but the approach that you take is very, very holistic, I would say. And it's quite interesting to me that you talk a lot about it in that has an artistic component to it. And I think that this holistic approach almost has to be some level of art, right? Like I'm an engineer by background, so I often tend to kind of tunnel my vision into a single way of doing things, and I love to have a single thing to optimize. But I think when it comes to buildings, having the context of what are you building, what is available, what is beautiful, what is sustainable, what is not affecting biodiversity. I think in order to balance all of these things within the framework of a commercial project also is to some extent, I think, some level, there is a level of art to it for sure. So it's very interesting that by sometimes taking the artistic approach, you are almost inadvertently addressing a lot of these topics. And you mentioned that some of your older projects that you have done without the goal of having them be flagship sustainable projects, they're now coming up with that. So that's very, very interesting.
Yeah, and I agree. I could have used the word holistic, but now I'm glad I didn't. But definitely the artistic approach is something that we do talk about more than the holistic, and I don't know the difference, but anyway. But I think it's important that when you talk about making art or the artistic approach, without it getting maybe too far-fetched, it's actually about hard work. It's about building evidence that you can then make informed decisions. And in that process, of course, you will have at least an artistic selection in what data that you work with and what data maybe you don't put so much emphasis on. I mean, even, a work of art, say a painting sitting on a wall, you could then, I guess, discuss for ages and ages if that was art or not. But it needs, in my view, to have some kind of evocation or some kind of reinterpretation by the one who does the art in order to become a work of art. If it's just a picture sitting on the wall and there's no consideration, then it's probably not art, but it could be just a wall sitting on the wall. So you could make a building also in that analogy that is not really having this artistic component because you have not put yourself in the transformation of the data or translation of the data into the final product. So this is kind of the work that we do at the office, that we collect the data, we interpret, and we make these kind of, say, artistic selections, or sometimes we can even address it as prototyping, which is kind of a more manual process. We make, I don't know, hundreds of variations and discuss them along each other's and say what kind of answers in our minds the question in the best way. So that's the artistic selection process. So and that can be back and forth just to make it a little bit more tangible. So it's not about sitting back and waiting for a lightning to strike. It is actually kind of a manual and for some products even a quite work intensive process, to put it a little bit say down to basic, down to the ground, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's reassuring, I think, to hear, because a lot of people kind of see sometimes these flagship projects and they sort of make the assumption that it's a very special office that has, a lot of resources to do that, and somehow they have maybe really, really capable professionals within the office, and that's why they're able to deliver that. So it's quite reassuring, I think, to some people to hear that even offices like yours, which deliver clearly quite innovative and quite sustainable projects, they still have to go through this iterative process of getting a lot of data and sort of trying and failing and discarding certain amounts of work until you reach that final product. And I think, again, it very much relates, I think, to how most of art is created. Like a painting is never, for example, just painted once and then that's it. Usually there's hundreds of copies which are sort of discarded until, let's say, the artist in that case sort of ends up with something that really fits what they're trying to deliver. So that's very, very, yeah, very interesting and reassuring to hear. And it kind of brings up a second question or something that I'm curious about, which is, how do you deal within this process, which can sometimes take, I assume, quite a long time, and you consider a lot of data points? How do you interact with the client of the project, and how does that sort of exchange stay healthy, and I guess also in line with the commercial aspect of the project?
Yeah, and obviously it can be different, but varies a lot from project to project. I guess you could say that the competition projects are maybe the easier ones in that respect, because in that way we are given freedom for most competitions to make this process kind of detached from the client. So the client obviously has a brief, they have some wants, they even pick a site, and then we can work with that. And then after some time, we can return to the client, and if we're good enough, lucky enough, I don't know, have the right timing, we can even win the competition. And then we have a common understanding with the client that this project or this conception that we actually did and delivered that they chose will be the ambition. So that's our common ambition. So that's kind of the easy way. If we get approached in another way by a client saying, okay, I want this new office building, can you help me develop it? We again have to dare to challenge them, to take the time, and also the time and the nerve, even the finance, to discard suggestions, because we come up with better ones along the way. So in that way, we have to put a little bit more focus on addressing the client and also handling the client, but in a way also engaging the client in this process, because the client usually, and it could be the client and it could also be local authorities even, because they usually have special insights to the area where they are placed, working from a local's perspective. So we can get those insights and we can actually put them into the process, and also use those as constraints or oppositions in the process. And I think it usually works quite well. The challenge maybe comes for all types of projects along the way, because this approach that we have works in our mindsets the best if we keep the project development open as long as possible, because this is kind of the generic image of developing a project. The further along the way you get, the more insight you get into the project, the more you understand the constraints. But on the contrary, the less impact your decision and your changes along the way can actually make into the original ambition. So it's our kind of difficulties, say, with the client usually come more along the way, that we sell them one idea and say this is the best idea, and then we move along the way, and then we get a better one, and then we have to say, well, actually now we are more informed, so we know something more. So let me tell you how we are going to change it. So these are kind of the main challenges, and I don't know. I think if we keep our clients close, then we can and informed, it actually works quite well. And one of the major arguments in that respect, at least for me, is that also the suggestions that you kind of disregard along the way brings value, because they will make you more certain that the way that you are moving is actually the right one. So you have to convince your client that disregarding the initial sketches or whatever is actually of great value, because you're more certain that you're going in the right way. So that could be a discussion that we'll have with clients.
Yeah. That's very nice. I think also in a different way, which is that you keep the client engaged, not just on the final delivery, but actually on some of the decisions and the thought process of the office while it's happening. And in my personal opinion, I guess when we are talking about sustainability and the performance of buildings or the contextual fitting of a building in an area, it's very important that it's not just the architect that thinks about these things, but ideally also the client that is commissioning the project, and ideally also whoever will end up using the building. So it's very nice to hear what the process that you just explained, because it kind of indicates that by the end of the project and hopefully by the delivery of the project, the client also has a certain story to tell about what were the decisions made and what was the data that was considered by the architect, which hopefully in their next project also, even if they don't work with the same office and maybe they work with an office that is less diligent on these kind of things, the client can kind of create pressure to go through this kind of thought process.
Sure. Yeah. That is our kind of hope, that we can even educate the client so that when they move on to the next project, or even just talk about the building that they're now using, of course have pride and can do the next project even on a higher level of understanding and even sustainable understanding, obviously, because these are for some for some materials, approaches, solutions, new ground that we do break. So that we also in that respect take pride and in challenging the process and the client all along the way. Even though that we obviously are quite aware that there is a time frame, there is a budget, all those still apply. We need to fit that in. And
yeah, of
in
course.
any case. Sure.
So if I can switch a little bit the subject, I know you've done a few projects which are in quite remote locations, and it seems like there's a special sensitivity when designing buildings in these kind of remote locations. I'm interested in sort of the relevance of design and the use, especially of natural materials or maybe local materials, to actually fit within these kind of territories and to integrate within these remote locations. Can you share some information about how you go about, especially the material selection process in these remote projects?
I guess the most remote project I believe we've done is in Ilulissat in the northern part of Greenland, and this is, really a remote site. It's only a small village. I don't know, a couple of thousand people living close by, and you have to go a long way to get there. So the climate there is quite harsh. So actually, back to the data analysis thing, we did a lot of wind studies. We realized that the site up there, even the ground, was preserved in some way, so not to be really touched so much. Also reflecting on the climate. So these were two of the key parameters in the initial design that we kind of, because of the wind, we needed to design an aerodynamic building. And because of the snow loads and those storms that they have there, we needed to lift the building from the ground, and also that in that respect, allowing us not to touch the ground so much, so you could actually thinking removing the building again, and there would be no traces of it sitting. So it was actually us choosing what parameters to put an emphasis on the snow buildups. Also, this is the aerodynamic issue, that reducing the snow buildups could also reduce the weight on the building and allowing us to use less material in order to make it structurally sound. And then, of course, some more social aspects. It cantilevers a little bit above a small lake, but in that spot, it gives you the opportunity to go on the rooftop of the building and actually view into the fjord which is the main agenda for that building, addressing this ice fjord. So even though the shape and the design is quite spectacular, there is specific reasons for each and every step that we did along the way, which makes sense in the greater picture. And of course, in a building like that, in a site like that, the site is where you would go and where world leaders have been to watch climate change by themselves or quite up front. You can actually see the actual drawing back every year because of global warming. It also serves that purpose, that making a special and spectacular mark on that site puts more emphasis on the possibility to visit and address and view and even kind of conceive the climate crisis. So you could say it works. It works in the local aspects of designing the whole practical thing, less foundations, easier loads, handling, and even in the greater perspective of sustainable by telling the story of climate change. So these were some of the issues, well, both in the local placemaking and then in the greater perspective, that were the drivers that we chose in this process for developing this building. And then next hand, this is a place where the local materials are, water, stone, some minerals. So in that respect, we also had to design a building that you could almost flat pack and ship out to be built in that place. So that was also issues that we needed to design it in a way that where that was actually possible. The construction period in that part of Greenland, or the possible outdoor kind of construction period, is only about 3 months a year. So you have to be very, very effective, and you kind of have to close the envelope within a very short period of time. Otherwise, it will be all dark and very cold, extremely windy. So there are some very harsh climatic conditions that kind of sets also a framework for the practical construction process. So and the whole material selection and detailing of the project were challenging in that setting. You could say another project we did, which it was well, a bit closer to civilization, to put it that way, in Ribe at the west coast of Denmark. Also, great wind conditions, but much more a cultural infected or culturally cultural condition, where we actually have been having houses and villages, people living for hundreds of years. We went into also it's kind of the same, actually, the wind studies and the typologies of the existing buildings being put there. But in that sense, it was important for us to kind of address some of the local materials, but in a new way, to make this new project that we did a museum documenting the Wadden Sea and UNESCO site just out, part of the ocean just outside Ribe. So we could address also the cultural issues in using local materials, making it more appealing and maybe more locally understood in a way. So it was not an object from outer space landing there, but you could actually see some kind of local and even local crafts foundation or relation with the building in the final setting, even though everyone will agree that it looks not like a traditional house, but it actually is a transformation of a traditional farm with 4 wings, courtyard in the middle. So this was the shape that we rebuilt on, and some of the buildings were sitting there, but we clad them in this new material. And also, we were kind of lucky enough to address an agenda of a crafts trade with all these the trade of thatched houses, putting straw on the roofs. So we did that on the roofs and on the facades and everywhere else where we could kind of do it. And in that sense, giving pride and reinventing in a way this traditional craftsman trade, which is still used locally here in Denmark and other surrounding countries, but mainly for old buildings. So it's kind of a refurbishment technique, but now we actually put it into a modern or contemporary framework, and in that way, kind of reinventing the trade. So that was a great pleasure, and also to work with on site with the craftsmen, that they actually kind of saw what they could do in a new way, and that really put a lot of enthusiasm into the project. So these are kind of two different ways to do this. Also this placemaking and addressing, I guess, the sustainability in different ways. Yeah. Very down to the material levels. So,
yeah, which is I think, as you mentioned earlier, I think a lot of the work actually gets quite detailed when you actually try to deliver one of these projects, and it has not just high level strategy setting about the project, but actual like iterative work and working with the people that will actually eventually deliver the building or all of that.
yeah.
Now,
this is also that I talked a little bit about, is keeping the process a little bit open. I mean, we usually do want to follow our projects through all the way, so that we do have a presence on site, so we can address all these little issues that will arise along the way, to kind of also use the initial ambition and translation of our perceptions into the form, to negotiate and to detail the project all along the way. And it's sometimes you also need to learn from the actual building process to get the full insight. And for that perspective, it's my impression that we also do, even facing the client, we can save money by making this perspective, rather than kind of handing over the responsibilities to someone who does not have the initial insights to build or to produce the final building. So it's a very integrated process.
super. I mean, maybe if we take a step back and from your experience and the projects that you have worked on up to now, clearly having a quite strong focus on sustainability, what would you say are the main challenges for architects to not just deliver, I mean, in the ideal scenario, deliver, of course, holistically sustainable buildings, but also if we were to drill down a little bit to what is slightly more urgent these years, which is to deliver lower carbon buildings, what would you say are the main challenges that you've seen from your work?
Well, there are a lot of technical issues, obviously, in transforming this and looking at different categories of materials. We have the traditional ones, we have concrete, steel, maybe even brick, and reinventing those, putting us into circular practice or bio-based materials. We are negotiating a lot on costs, which is kind of I guess, the boring thing to say. This is an issue because we are in an industrialized industry where a lot of focus has been put on optimizing the production of materials and productions at site. So cost is a difficulty, and the next one could be time. Delivering recycled, upcycled materials requires that we do know from a quite early point that we can use these materials when we get to the actual construction. So in that way, time can be, and even quality. Usually, a client making an investment for the next 50 years or so do require that the final product has some kind of quality that we can ensure that it stands over time. But I think the most interesting discussion, and maybe where we could focus, is on the aesthetics, on selecting the materials, because that probably proves to be, even though that you can use time and money and quality, whatever, as arguments, it's about understanding the new qualities of a wooden column in opposition to a concrete or steel column that you could probably make a lot slimmer and more elegant in a way, or an easy osmotic design. But putting in a wooden column, it puts some more kind of weight into the picture. So it's a different kind of aesthetics where everything, maybe from our perspective right now, gets a little bit more clumsy, or you have to address it, or you have to view it in a different way. And this is the kind of the transformation that we are going through. And even within the office, we have the discussions. I think, for example, a steel beam would fit better in this place because it doesn't take up the light from the facade or whatever. But we have to insist that we are actually right now doing a lot of wood constructions, and they, as it is, to carry the same spans, physically they take up more space and maybe take up more light from the facade, or we have to design a little bit less glass in the facade to kind of minimize the carbon footprint of the entire building, because the glass is kind of a heavy load on those calculations. So these are, I guess, just kind of small examples, but we are doing this within the office, trying to do these calculations on the carbon footprints, lifetime analysis on the material selection, so we can actually, for ourselves, get into this new currency, I'd almost say, of climate, the climate footprints of the global warming potential, but also discussing with the clients that, well, maybe you need to spend a little bit more money, maybe you need to put a little bit of risk into this. We try to handle it the best way, but this is kind of the climate, what the climate crisis will tell us. But it brings back the question of aesthetics every time, as far as we know, by the way, because it very much comes down to that we are building physical environments that people will live in and inhabit in different ways, and of course look upon and relate to. So these are. I think the aesthetics and understanding, say, a new aesthetic is probably the main challenge, and that goes both insights from us architects, that we have to put in a new understanding of the materials and how to use them in an appealing way, as well as, I mean, we need to understand it to address clients, contractors, suppliers, even that this is the way that we should move.
I guess it's an interesting situation we're in, because I mean, aesthetics and what is beautiful is quite it's a socially constructed idea. So I think one thing that architects are experiencing, and they're sitting in a very interesting position, is that because of these requirements to build more in line with the climate emergency, potentially some of the aesthetics will also start changing to potentially also change, hopefully towards the better, and to deliver a lower impact environment, but also
this is the conflict that I see at the moment. I mean, at least in Denmark, where I'm sitting, even clients and even our regulatory requirements, they do say that we need to address the climate and we need to kind of fulfill certain requirements. The clients, they know they have to go this way, at least if they need funding from, I don't know, some kind of fund, then they are required to go this way. So it's actually our conception of our picture of this aesthetic that's the biggest challenge, because we pretty much have taken care of many of the other things. We know there's cost, time, all that kind of disturbs a little bit, but the big thing is this. We know how we need to do it, but we need to challenge ourselves and our perception of or our idea of what a building should look like in many ways.
Yeah, understood, and also agreed.
Maybe, I mean, it doesn't have to be that it doesn't have to be that foreign, I think, but still, it's a kind of a transformation that we are going through, and yeah, it's a negotiation.
Great. Maybe as a closing statement, Noel, it would be nice to kind of get your view on how we're heading as an industry, as a society, from an architect's perspective. Are you optimistic about reaching targets that we're setting as companies and as countries? Maybe not the most positive thing to close up on, but
no, it's not. But now I said it, I'm not too optimistic on reaching the goals and the Paris Agreement and all that. I think that has gone already. So now we will address it anyway. But even though I'm not optimistic, I haven't given up. We did at one point have the discussion, and I think maybe that's also relevant in when we talk about the ambitions that we do have with our projects. I mean, the most sustainable square meter that you can have is the one that you do not build. So that's the kind of the first step. You need to know that it may not be necessary for you to build, or you can be very, very sustainable by not building anything. But maybe that won't get us too far. But then we have to ask kind of the next questions in line. So is it right to build in this place that we have seen now? I mean, do we actually need the building here? Can we transform something that's already there? Because that will give us a much lower climate impact, using existing buildings and refurbish, transform them into something new. And if you kind of get through those barriers, then of course we get into this more detailed discussion on then, okay, we said we need to build in this place. We can argue that, but then how do we do it? And that's where we get into the kind of the process of the material selection, and we have to be very, very specific and very precise on how we then address those thematics. So in that way, I think I don't know if that's positive or not, but the responsibility that we take upon us as architects, and hopefully we get into all parts of the value chain, all the processes from the initial discussions with the client throughout designing, building, and even delivering the building, we can address as many of these issues and keep pushing those as much as we can, because apart from the client, perhaps we are the ones that kind of that are in the process all along the way, and we can feel and we will take upon us this responsibility of trying to meet the goals anyway.
Great. So I guess if I can summarize a little bit, I would agree maybe that we are less. I would probably also say I'm a little bit less optimistic, but the goal here is to keep going and to keep striving towards what we can achieve, because I think it's not about missing or achieving targets, and it's a binary thing. It's also how badly we will miss specific targets. Yeah,
exactly. We cannot just lean back in hopelessness. That's
not helpful either. Yeah,
I guess that's not really kind of not helpful either. So maybe listen to Mr. Gutierrez. He says we have to do whatever we can everywhere, something
exactly,
like that, all the time. So it's not so much about priorities. We have to prioritize everything all the time,
exactly.
if we can.
Thank you very much, Noel. It was a super interesting discussion, and also very, very interesting to hear about some of the approaches that you're working on.
Yeah, thank you very much.